Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the NBA Front Office Show. Hope everybody had a very Merry Christmas. Got a lot more NBA news to break down today. Trevor Lane here. You can follow me on Twitter at Trevor_Lane, joined by Keith Smith. Follow him at Keith Smith NBA. Keith, I think we kick off the post-Christmas show with a Simmons siren.
Let's go. We got it, man. Little Christmas Day Simmons. So the news that broke on Christmas Day as part of their long pregame show on ESPN and ABC, Adrian Wojnarowski gave a Ben Simmons update. Now, it wasn't exactly breaking news that he had to rush off to, but he threw out that Minnesota, Indiana, Sacramento were interested. But he said the team to really watch in the Ben Simmons trade talks is the Cleveland Cavaliers. And that is notable because now we've heard the Cavs a handful of times. And Woj very clearly noted that trade talks have all but shut down over the league over the last week or so as teams are focused more on getting players into uniform to play games
Right.
Than anything else. And we'll talk about that here in a little bit. But he said that the Cavs are very interested in Simmons. They see him as somebody who can help continue to push them forward in the Eastern Conference. They've got some interesting pieces that they could send back salary matching wise to Philadelphia without putting too much of a burden on the Sixers. So I'd say that that's definitely something to keep an eye on.
Well, and those teams make a lot of sense. We've been saying this from day one that it would probably wind up being a team that isn't normally a major free agent destination because they're going to see this as their opportunity. They're probably going to be willing to pay a little bit more than a team that typically gets interest in free agency. So these teams that wouldn't normally be able to get a guy like a Ben Simmons, certainly not in free agency, they're going to be more willing to fork over a bit more in a trade, thinking this is their chance to get him. But the Cavs specifically, what does their offer look like? I mean, obviously, we don't have details right now, but let's just kind of go down that path. Let's say the Cavs are putting forth an offer for Ben Simmons. What pieces are they putting in the deal?
Yeah, so presumably the ones we can take off the table are like Jared Allen,
Sure.
Darius Garland, probably Lauri Markkanen, because those are the guys you'd want to keep to build around Simmons with. Kevin Love, I think we could take off the table because I don't know that Philly would be overly interested in bringing him in. Now, Woj did say there's a good chance this would be a 3 or 4 team trade. So maybe Love is the outgoing salary matching for Cleveland. But without getting into, I mean, we could spend the next 4 hours dreaming up 3 and 4 team trades, and we're not going to do that. So let's take Love out. So I would say Ricky Rubio, maybe, right? Because he almost has to be then if Love's not going to be, because it's 17.8 million of salary matching. And then it gets kind of interesting. Would they want Colin Sexton and say, hey, we'll look at his restricted free agency. We'll take care of that. If you're Cleveland, would you put Isaac Okoro in the deal as kind of the young piece there? He'd be kind of interesting guard with size. That's something Philly doesn't have a lot of. Most of their guards are a little bit smaller there. Jetty Osman, another wing he's actually having a fairly good season for Cleveland. So that could be an interesting piece. So my guess is Rubio, and then kind of from there, it's almost whatever the Cavs want. No, I didn't mention his name, but just so nobody jumps all over us. Of course, Evan Mobley is off the table. That would not happen.
So I think that the Colin Sexton inclusion is interesting. And I think that he would be a likely piece to be routed to a 3rd or 4th team.
Sure.
Simply because the 76ers are going to be looking for guys who can play this season. They want to go ahead and contend right now. So it would make sense for another team, perhaps a team that just kind of feels like maybe they're out of the running this year, to jump in and say, sure, we'll give Colin Sexton a look. He's injured. We're not going to see him this season, but next season we know he can be a good impact player for us. So maybe that's a piece that gets thrown in, still has some value, particularly to a team that's not trying to win right now.
Yeah, and Philly already has Tyrese Maxey, so you've kind of got your young scoring guard handled there that you don't really need to be taken on Sexton, especially in the fact where he needs paid next year to some extent at the very least. So yeah, there's definitely ways to get there. So it's one of those where it's not one where you can almost eliminate it out of hand because it's like, well, there's just no pieces. It doesn't make sense. You could get there. My guess is Kevin Love probably wouldn't be a part of it too, because he's also having a pretty good year. And if I was the Cavs, I might even be a little skeptical on giving up Ricky Rubio too, because he's having a very good year as well. But it's Ben Simmons, right?
You got to
You're
get
not going
something.
to get a chance at Ben Simmons again.
Right.
And I can only imagine if you're JB Bickerstaff and it's Christmas, right? We allow ourselves to dream and wish a little bit. A defensive group headlined by Simmons and Mobley, holy crap. Like you're going to be able to defend anything
Hmm.
that team's throw at you, especially if you've got Jared Allen rather sitting on the back line to clean up anything that gets by you. You got to get shooting. Then you really got to
Yeah.
lock in, and it can't just be Lauri Markkanen and Darius Garland as an improved shooter. You got to get one more really good knockdown shooter. But that's something you pursue with whatever you have left after you make a Simmons trade.
Now, you mentioned JB Bickerstaff. News came out, of course, that he got
Yeah.
that contract extension, which is great for him. A guy who's kind of bounced around a bit, and now here he is. He's locked in Cleveland now. What is it, through 2027, I believe?
Yeah, I think
Which,
so. Usually that last year is a team
yes.
option on coach contracts, but yes, for the foreseeable future.
But just to kind of wrap things up with this Simmons thing, right now the 76ers are sitting in the 6th seed. The Cavs are the 5. Does does
Yep.
that does that change the discussion at all? Like, are the 76ers then reluctant to send Ben Simmons to the Cavs, knowing that they're in direct competition with them in terms of playoff seeding?
Yeah, my guess would be no, just as long as they get back whatever it is they're looking
Yeah,
for. Because you look at it as, all right, that's cool, but I mean, they're right there.
right.
We're not that far behind them. And we've still got Joel Embiid, who's quite frankly playing at an MVP level. He's just not getting the pub because the team's record isn't very good because he hasn't had a ton of help. But I do think that's one where if you're the Sixers, you say, nah, we'll get in, then we'll worry about passing them up later in the standings, or we'll, if we run into them and they have home court advantage, we're not going to exactly,
Yeah.
concern ourselves too much with that.
All right. Well, definitely a team to keep an eye on, the Cleveland Cavaliers. We'll see if they can make a deal for Ben Simmons as we inch closer to the trade deadline. You know that the urgency is only going to grow. Will Ben Simmons be on the move soon? I guess we'll just have to wait to find out. We do need to get into the Clippers, though. Paul George out 3 to 4 weeks with a torn UCL in his elbow. That's not good for a Clippers team that's already
No.
missing Kawhi Leonard. Now, fortunately, we've talked about this. The Western Conference has been considerably more forgiving than it has in years past, but still tough blow for the Clippers to be out Paul George. You look, they just lost to Denver. I believe
Yep.
it was last
Last
night,
night. Yep.
and that's a game that where you look at it and you say, okay, well, Paul George there. That's probably a win on their record. So I think they are going to drop some games now without Paul George. But, again, the West has been more forgiving. So what this means for the standings, they might still be able to tread water.
Yeah, they're probably going to be able to hang in. Clearly, the Western Conference has Warriors, Suns at the top.
Yep.
Then you have the Jazz kind of in the third spot, but in a tier by themselves. They're very close to the Warriors, Suns tier. So those three. And then Memphis has kind of set themselves aside because played really well without John Morant.
Yep.
That now that he's back, he looks like he's getting going a little bit. They're just kind of starting the front end of what's likely probably going to end up being multiple players out with COVID because it's just how this has gone. Nobody has gotten through one of these with one or two guys out. It's ended up being multiple players
Right.
on just about every team. So we'll see where that goes. Then it's this whole big bucket of teams that are all kind of within a game or two of each other. And that's the Clippers, Nuggets, Lakers, Mavericks, Timberwolves, and Spurs, I guess we can put in there Trailblazers if we want to. But definitely down to Minnesota. They're all within a game or so of each other. So yeah, I think it is gonna a lot of this is gonna be, what happens, when these teams start getting players back. Like the Lakers, the Mavs, and the Timberwolves. Are they gonna be able to push up the standings past the Clippers? Does this change anything for the Clippers? Do you look at it all and say, maybe we could move a couple of these other veteran pieces out and see what it looks like? I've also, one other thing I'll say on the Paul George
Mhm.
injury, there was some stuff floating around the internet that 3 to 4 weeks is a optimistic
Yes.
timeline. That it's probably going to be closer to 6 weeks, if not longer. It's a rough injury, and gosh, I can't remember who it is now who had this same injury. It was Nicholas Batum, his
Mm.
teammate. He had this injury, but it was in his non-shooting arm, and he missed 6 weeks and said his arm felt useless when he came back. So you're talking about Paul George's shooting arm. So yeah, I think this is going to be a little bit tougher for him to get back in 3 to 4 weeks. I just find it hard to believe.
Yeah, I think, and I'd have to go back and look, but I believe the reporting on it was they were hoping that it could heal on its own in 3 to 4 weeks, and that was when they were going to go back in and reevaluate.
Yeah, that's
So
scary.
yeah, so that doesn't necessarily mean. I mean, look, there is, I know, obviously a surgical route with the UCL and that
Hmm.
injury. And I mean, if you go into baseball, you can get into like Tommy John surgery and all that kind of stuff. But I think that the hope is that he can just rest it and he'll be okay with that. But 3 to 4 weeks and then they're going to reevaluate. That doesn't necessarily mean he's coming back in three, which we've cautioned that a bunch on this show. Reevaluate does not mean return. So
Correct.
it's something to consider here. The Clippers may be without him for a longer period of time than just 3 to 4 weeks. So if you're a Clippers fan and you're marking your calendar, hey, 4 weeks from now, Paul George is back. I wouldn't do that just yet because I think you're setting yourself up for potentially some disappointment there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Hey, breaking news.
Yeah.
Jason Tatum into the health and safety
Oh,
protocols. So I'm going to let you carry the show for a second while I get a tweet off.
ouch, man. That's these. You know what the health and safety protocols have been, and that was one of the next topics that we need to get into. They have just been running rampant around the NBA. We've seen so many teams that are getting hit hard by this, and they're having to adjust on the fly. And this is, as Keith was talking about a little bit ago, this is in part why the trade talks have died down. If you watched this show like 2 weeks ago, we had a week solid of just about trade talks, trade talks, trade talks. Everything was really ramping up. It sounded like teams were getting ready to talk deal as we were getting closer and closer to that December 15th date. But then as the health and safety protocol losses have really picked up, instead teams have had to shift. They've had to shift into more of a focus of how do we
Yeah.
get enough healthy players in order to play the games? And obviously Jason Tatum being out is a massive blow to the Boston Celtics. We've seen some key players go down recently. You look, even guys like what Kyle Lowry is out right now in health and safety protocols. The Bulls just got Zach LaVine back, but then they lose Lonzo Ball, goes into health and safety protocols. It feels like most teams are getting hurt pretty badly by this. So it's been a challenge for teams around the NBA to deal with health and safety protocols. Keith, I know you just looked at it. How many teams right now have been untouched by health and safety protocols as of this moment?
Yeah, so by just doing a very, very quick count off the latest news of teams that have players currently in the health and safety protocols, I think Denver, Indiana, and Utah are the only three teams that don't have a player in the health and safety protocols right now. So everybody else does. San Antonio hadn't. They've got DeJounte Murray, I
Mm-hmm.
believe. Oklahoma City has Trey Mann in the health and safety protocols now. They were two teams that hadn't had anybody in there. So yeah, it's still going on. Over 500 players. I think the number is 512 players have appeared in NBA games this month. Just to put the perspective on that number, 510 is the max roster size before you get into hardships. So we're already there, and that's not including guys like Kawhi and Jamal Murray and those guys who've been out all season.
Mm-hmm.
So they're just telling you, how far they are, into these things. Like last night, the Raptors played with, I think, four regular players and four call up players. The Magic have played games with more call up guys than regular players available. It's just it's a mess, and but we're gonna see it just keep moving forward. Like this Boston Minnesota game tonight.
Mm-hmm.
Minnesota doesn't have Karl Anthony Towns, Anthony Edwards, Patrick Beverly,
D'Angelo
uh,
Russell.
D'Angelo Russell, Jarrett
Yep.
Vanderbilt, Naz Reid, and Torian Prince. So no,
So
there's
it's
nobody in Minnesota feeling
the
bad that Jason
Wolves
Tatum is out.
in
Yeah, exactly. So
air
yeah,
quotes.
it's but it's running through the league. It's now the good news is several teams got guys out over the Christmas holiday weekend.
Yep.
We're seeing a lot of the main guys are returning through this. A lot of the guys are coming back and saying, I feel great. I didn't feel bad when I was
Mm-hmm.
out. The league and the PA are expected to continue to pick up talks here this week after now that we're past the Christmas holiday, reducing that time from 10 days to 6 days for asymptomatic and vaccinated players. So my guess is we're going to see that pass here within the next couple of days, which that'll get even more players
Right.
out. So we're going to, I think this is not, it's it's still very serious. It's still something we should be taking very seriously. There still needs to be precautions taken, but this is not a shut everything down, the season's over kind of thing,
Right.
because these guys are returning relatively quickly.
Absolutely, absolutely. John Collins, another name that just entered health and safety protocols. But yeah,
Draymond Green
oh yeah,
too
yeah, yeah. Draymond Green
after
as
the
well.
Christmas game. Yeah, yeah,
It's
yeah.
crazy. But again, like you said, we're starting to see guys come out of health and safety protocols. Not a doctor, but the hope, of course, is that these guys who go into health and safety protocols who have tested positive, they will then have a degree of immunity for the next few months here. So the hope is that you get through this difficult period right now. Maybe it lasts through January or whatever. We know the NBA is reevaluating things as of January 19th. And then heading into springtime, hopefully guys will be good to go from there. And as we get further and further into this, you'll start to see these taper off more and more. That's the hope of the NBA right now. And based on what we're seeing around the league, how many guys who have gone into protocols, you certainly have to hope that's the way it goes, because so many players right now have at least either been in protocols or just come out of protocols. It's crazy. It really feels like it's been everybody at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's just a mess. There's just no other way to put it. I mean, just some of these rosters are barely recognizable, and teams are getting through. We were going to talk about a couple of the guys who
Yeah.
have been coming up here. Greg Monroe getting back in the NBA. The Moose season in Minnesota.
The Moose
He's
is
going to join the
loose.
Timberwolves. We just covered it. The entirety of the Minnesota Timberwolves front court is basically
Mm-hmm.
out. So wouldn't even be surprised if he just starts. We had our first hardship turn into a standard contract.
Yep.
Alfonso McKinney with the Chicago Bulls
Former
signed a
Laker.
second hardship, and then they ended up signing him to a standard deal. They waived Alize Johnson, and then McKinney promptly went into the health and safety protocols because apparently that's how this goes.
Yeah.
Can't have nice things.
Nope.
But yeah, Kyle Lowry was put in the protocols this week over the weekend too. So there, and then we're hearing news on a couple guys who won't sign second 10-day
Mm-hmm.
hardship rules. Isaiah Thomas with the Lakers. Lakers are going to go in a different direction. I think it makes sense. They've got a lot of their guards back now, and
Yeah.
IT after a really good first game didn't look as good in the subsequent games. So, and then Justin Robinson to the Kings. Kings got a couple of their guards back, so they're gonna let him move on and not do a second one. And there is a couple rule tweaks with the 10 days that I think are worth covering very quickly
Yeah.
here. Normally in a 10-day process, a team can sign a player to 10 days, and then if they want to keep them beyond that, they have to sign them for the rest of the season. And that's to protect players. You don't want
Sure.
teams just, hey, we'll keep you on a 10-day, keep you on a 10-day. They've eliminated that on these hardships. Teams could sign a player to 3 or 4 of them if they wanted to. They also said 10 players on 10-day hardships, they can actually be put on the inactive list. Normally, a hardship player can't be put on an inactive list. And what they're allowing for normally with a hardship is you get the player back and you're back in a roster compliance. You got to waive the hardship player or somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
What they're allowing for is you could keep them for a couple extra days just in case somebody else goes into the protocols, and
Okay.
then you're you're a little bit covered with that. So lots of tweaks to those beyond just that they don't count against the cap or the tax and those kind of things. So veteran Anthony Toliver, just kind of a fun note. He
Saw
signed
that.
with the New Orleans Pelicans, his 12th NBA team, tying the
Unreal.
record with 5 other players to have played for as many as 12 NBA teams. So kind of fun note on that one.
Somebody needs to pick him up and get him to 13 after he finishes up with the
Right.
Pelicans. Just to add just a little bit of extra fun into it.
Absolutely.
We need as much
Yeah.
fun as we can get this
Fun this
season.
season. Yep. Yep.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
No doubt. I will say too, your guy, Alex Caruso. I know you're a big fan
uh,
of Alex Caruso. I believe he's now the only Bulls player who hasn't gone in the health and safety protocols this season,
he's
outside of their recent hardship signings.
he's been out due to injury a number of
Injury.
times.
But
But yeah, you
but
may
no,
be right
not
on
health.
health and safety
Yeah, because
protocols.
Lonzo went in over the weekend too. So
Right.
Lonzo Ball did. So I believe he's the only Bulls regular player that is not there. So,
It would make sense that COVID couldn't touch Alex Caruso because he is the GOAT. So, it makes sense. Makes sense.
Captain America, right? He's
That's
immune.
right.
He's immune. to those
Captain
things.
America. He's the bald eagle, the bald mamba, big balder brand. Gosh, I
Yeah,
miss
there
him.
it is, man. Phew. We just turned this into the Alex Caruso show.
That's the Alex
Caruso
Caruso.
show.
Yes.
Yes,
Yeah,
I see.
that's
I beat you to it. I love it.
Keith, we've got some of these veterans who have come back. Darren Collison now playing with the Lakers. That finally,
Yep.
after a few years of being rumored to be a Laker, Darren Collison's with the Lakers. You mentioned Greg Monroe with the Bulls. You've got Lance Stevenson with the Atlanta Hawks. Which Joe Johnson with your Celtics. Which of these like guys from years gone by? Which one has been the most fun? Which one do you think's been the most fun to see? And IT coming back, of course, as well. Which one has been the most fun for you?
Yeah, I'm going to be biased and I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to say it's Joe Johnson just because it was 20 years in between
Yeah.
stints for him with the Celtics. And it kind of puts a capper on his career. He never should have been traded in the first place. That was a panic trade that Boston made. So I think Joe Johnson coming back and being getting a bucket in his first game back on a very Joe Johnson play, snaked the pick and roll and pulled up from the elbow and knocked it down. So yeah, it's that's I'm gonna go with that one. And
That
maybe my bias is showing, but
no, that's a good one. That's a good one. I like it. I like it. So and I'd actually agree, even as a Lakers fan. I think that was just a cool moment to see Joe
yeah,
Johnson come back and get that bucket. So yes, then one of the again looking for silver linings in a difficult time. But
yeah. The Atlanta Hawks just announced DeLon Wright is gone into the health and safety protocols. So
God,
yeah, just rough. I mean, yeah, they're down to 10 players available and only a couple guards among that group. So little tough. But
all
yeah,
right.
we move forward.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. Moving on. All right, everybody. Let us know in the comments section what your thoughts are on how the NBA is handling everything with health and safety protocols. Is there a player that's your favorite that has gotten back into the mix? And your thoughts on the Ben Simmons potentially to the Cavs deal. Is that a good landing spot for him? And what do you think a deal would look like? Let us know in the comments section. And of course, subscribe right here to the NBA Front Office YouTube channel. Turn on those notifications. If you're listening to the podcast version of this, make sure you follow us over on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever it is that you listen to podcasts. Till next time, everybody, stay safe and see ya.